Allie, Raffa is on Capitol Hill for us here at NBC News. Carol Lee is outside the White House. Also with us is NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapur and Punchbowl News founder and CEO Anna Palmer. But Allie, let's start with some of the what we're learning today, which is the reaction to this. Democrats seem downright giddy for a bill that I'm guessing 6 months ago they wouldn't have liked.
Exactly, Chuck. You know, the reaction to this was sort of shocking. We had Senate Democrats really disappointed with Joe Manchin in the weeks after he turned his back on Build Back Better. We heard some very sharp language from them in the days after he did that. And then you saw the complete reversal of this today when this bill was announced, this bill that was kept very tight, very close to the vest by Senator Manchin and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Many senators saying they didn't even know this was being worked on and didn't even know that it had dropped in their inboxes until the press surprised them yesterday, chasing them around Capitol Hill, asking them their reaction to this bill, and the senators finding out really from us. So you're starting to see the reaction pour in to this legislation. You know, you have Democrats saying that this would be a great thing, obviously, as you can imagine, eager to get this passed because then they can go home during this August recess and tout this and brag about this as an accomplishment ahead of the midterm elections. And you have Republicans growing more and more frustrated with it, really clinging on to this argument that it would raise taxes and be very bad for businesses, Chuck.
Allie, I want to ask you a question about Kyrsten Sinema, but let me put up a quick little bullet point of some of the easy things to describe what's in this bill. There'd be a 15% minimum corporate tax. That is something that they've been trying to work on globally. The drug pricing reform issue, increased IRS enforcement, energy and climate spending, ACA funding, deficit reduction, and I skipped over one because I want to make it the part of this question. Closing the carried interest, what some people call a loophole, but the carried interest deduction hits hedge fund managers hard. It's something Democratic Senator from Arizona Kyrsten Sinema had said was a non-starter. So that seems to be the one piece of mystery we have here, Allie. What have we heard from Senator Sinema today?
Yeah, still a huge question mark of where Senator Sinema stands on this. We reached out to her office last night after this, didn't hear back. And even today, one of our producers caught up with her outside the Senate steps here. And it was kind of a no comment saying her spokesperson telling our producer, rather, that she's still looking over this legislation. And remember, this is becoming more and more of a numbers game. This is going to come down to every single Democratic senator not only being present but voting in favor, putting more and more of a focus on Sinema and where she will likely vote on this.
Carol Lee, I've not, you know, it's funny in these stories when a deal like this comes together, there's usually a lot of people that want to insert themselves as being one of the cooks in the kitchen. Hey, I was getting this done. It seems like the White House was not involved in this, were they? And we just don't know it yet?
Yeah, look, they're involved in the sense that the president has to sign a bill. And so there was communication about whether, you know, what was in it and that it was going to be acceptable to him. But I think what has happened here, Chuck, is that whatever the Democrats were going to come up with, the president was going to sign. They just wanted a bill. And you went through it. This is the incredibly shrinking legislation. And so he took what he could get. And it's more than they thought they would get. I was in Saudi Arabia with President Biden when Manchin said what he said about climate, and everybody thought it was over, and they were completely deflated. And so this is something where the president feels like he's getting a little momentum. They're ready to pivot to the midterms. There's a very tiny window to get legislation. The president's agenda has completely been diminished. And so he was always going to take whatever he can get. But he even said himself when he was in Saudi Arabia, he was asked by Peter Alexander, you know, about Manchin, and he said, I'm not talking to him. So it's just been, I think, for a White House that's been very frustrated with what's happening on Capitol Hill. They're just kind of breathing a sigh of relief that they can embrace something that's happening there.
Sahil Kapur, this really is a victory for Chuck Schumer. Look, there was a lot of people who were whispering some unpleasant things, frustrations there. Is this a reaffirmation of his leadership of the Senate Democrats?
Well, Chuck, I think just a couple of days ago, a lot of people who were very angry with Chuck Schumer are a little happier with him now. The idea being that this was ultimately his job to get all 50 Senate Democrats on board with a plan. And there was a lot of criticism of Chuck Schumer last year after he had that document from Joe Manchin that said $1.5 trillion. He kept it secret. Our sources tell us that Speaker Pelosi was not happy about that either. But the fact is, Chuck Schumer seems to have gotten Manchin on board with a plan that just 2 days ago seemed extremely unlikely. And Manchin, I don't know what he's been putting in his coffee lately, but he's been so feisty in defense of this plan just this morning, batting back criticisms of the idea that a corporate tax minimum rate of 15% would be bad, almost channeling FDR by saying, come out, I want to know who you are, come forward and tell me, who you are, who are not paying your taxes. He's defending other components of this, the energy items, climate change funding, the healthcare funding. This is something that Joe Manchin is fully embraced now. It's the first time he's put his name on a series of proposals that Chuck Schumer and Democratic leaders support. So it's a rare surprise, a rare positive surprise, let's put it, for Democrats who've had a lot of negative surprises. And Chuck, being in Los Angeles, I'll point out that Democrats want an argument, need an argument about inflation, something to say, something to tell constituents that they're doing. And around here, their constituents or their lawmakers on the Democratic side, like Katie Porter and Mike Levin, who need an argument. They're in tough swing districts and threatened this fall. This gives them some argument to make that we're doing something about health care and drug prices.
Sahil, you've been following these negotiations for over a year. And it's interesting to me, Joe Manchin had said from the beginning he wasn't for all these social safety net ideas in this thing. This is what he wanted it to be. Didn't he end up being a man of his word here? Like, at the end of the day, he supported exactly what he said he was willing to support, and he wasn't willing to. It was the other stuff he was struggling with, and he ended up, I mean, in fairness to him, was he not a man of his word ultimately?
I think he can certainly make the argument that he has been, Chuck, given that at least the items he said he wanted to do, tax increases, drug pricing, healthcare, yes, about last year, late last year, around the fall, he soured on the social spending and safety net items. Now, there are Democrats who will come back and say, well, he at least said $1.5 trillion. Why don't they do that? And now the price tag is much lower. That argument will still go on. But the fact is, 2 days ago, progressives thought they were going to get nothing on climate change. Today, they have a $369 billion investment in climate change, which may be their biggest priority of all. So this is likely to pass as long as Manchin holds, as long as Sinema holds on the tax increases. She's likely to be okay with just about everything else in this based on our reporting. It was all in the White House framework last October that she had endorsed, but the carried interest has been a problem for her. Is she going to torpedo that over a $14 billion tax break that affects hedge fund managers and private equity managers? That would be a pretty tough vote to take on the Senate floor, but maybe Senate Democratic leaders won't chance it if she doesn't come around.
Anna Palmer, there seems to be a lot of upset Republicans today, and I sort of don't, on one hand, it seems to be they upset that they feel like, hey, the Democrats got to win here. How did we let them get a win? But I don't quite understand they seem to be thinking some word was broken. I don't know who gave them any word.
Yeah, you rarely see Chuck Schumer outmaneuver Mitch McConnell when it comes to legislative floor strategy. And so this stunned not only a lot of the fellow Democrats, but certainly stunned Republicans, because as we all remember, Mitch McConnell put that line in the sand saying they were not going to pass this CHIPS bill if there was going to be this larger reconciliation effort. And so what had kind of come forward was a smaller package that Schumer said he was going to do on reconciliation. Mitch McConnell said, OK. Then they had this big CHIPS bill vote that passed. Has been something that we've been covering on a day-to-day basis for months about what was going to happen with that package. And then immediately thereafter, they come out with this big deal. I think McConnell is just very frustrated because there's nothing he can do. There's not a lot of maneuvering. They know that this is going to be a 50-vote passage on this reconciliation package. And all eyes are on Kyrsten Sinema. Mitch McConnell has nothing more to do. They're going to attack on raising taxes, certainly, but their toolbox doesn't have much to do in able to actually torpedo Democrats in this effort.
Allie, Raffa, we saw that the burn pits bill seemed to be the first, I guess you'd call it the first collateral damage to this deal that Republicans pulled their support. Can you walk us through that? Is that bill really dead, or can it get revived?
I would equate this to sort of being on the back burner. You know, you saw Republicans really act very swiftly in removing this from the agenda yesterday after this came to light, this bill. And so today you saw Jon Stewart. There was a huge crowd outside the Senate side today, really talking about how disappointed they are that this was put on the back burner. This is delayed now, saying that this is not these are essentially political games. That this isn't anything to joke about or delay. And you know, you saw families of 9/11 victims also coming out and saying that they're disappointed in this. I don't think it's dead yet. I think it's more of a we'll wait and see approach, but definitely some disappointment around the decision to just not even consider this and vote on this yesterday.
Carol Lee, look, family leave's not in here. The child care tax credit's not in here. Look, the social safety net stuff is not in here. The Obamacare subsidies are prescription drug reform. Does the White House have a thought on how to ever revive any of those things? Is it time to actually try bipartisanship again on that? Romney seems to be open to both family leave and child care tax credit, but in a radically different approach.
Yeah, Chuck, it's a great question. And I think if from the White House's perspective, things are just moving into a political space now, and all of that stuff is up in the air, and they're campaigning for the midterms, and there's a lot of thinking going on about what happens after the midterms, and there's obviously going to be a lame duck session and then a new Congress, so there's a lot of that is still in flux. And to your question, though, you know, the president had promised a lot of those things. Those are a lot of things that the Democratic base likes. So while he's celebrating all of this and he's having a good week, a good day, good couple of days, it's not clear that this is something that's going to longer term help him politically. He's still in a very difficult, tricky spot here. So it remains to be seen if he can't get those things done, and if this stuff that he's saying will work, and if he's out there saying we're not in a recession and they're signaling that that's not likely what's going to happen with the economy. You know, if that comes back to bite him, and if this legislation and all of these efforts he keeps outlining and pointing to that he's doing to deal with inflation, if that doesn't work, it almost doesn't matter.
And Anna Palmer, look, like I said, Republicans are trying to, I saw Tom Cotton was going, vote against the CHIPS bill, send a message on the reconciliation. And I saw people like Tom Cole going, look, I like this bill. I don't like other bills. I can't. I'm not gonna relate one to the other. They weren't able to kill it. 24 Republicans ended up voting for it. Is other than TV ads and pounding their fist, is there anything legislatively you think Republicans would try to thwart in order to punish Democrats over this?
I mean, you just were talking about that veterans bill, right? I think that is some of the collateral damage that you're seeing in the short term around what Republicans can kind of do. But we are heading into, this August stretch. The time is very short between how much Congress is actually in between now and that midterm election. Government funding, it's hard to see Republicans hold that hostage in retribution to Democrats taking up this reconciliation package. There's just not a lot of things that they are going to be able to kind of hold up at this point. I think the bigger question is when will they get over it, besides just using this really as a campaign tactic? That's going to be the real question. And what's been interesting is really the Democrats in the House that had been potentially saying they weren't going to vote for this kind of a package without SALT, provisions and other provisions. Democrats are really coalescing here in a way that we haven't seen in recent weeks, where they seem ready to pass whatever can get past the Senate. The House, it's going to be tight with 3, votes, but they seem very ready to move that in that direction.
When you're dying of thirst, any little bit of liquid will quench it there. I think in an odd way, it's uniting Democrats. And you could say this, Republicans are very comfortable running against raising taxes. That's something that unites their party. So maybe oddly enough, this thing unites both parties.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.